Thank you for watching this project help video for lesson 11. I will help you answer each question in the project by providing step-by-step instructions using example problems. A good strategy might be to pause the video after each example and then work the corresponding problem in your project. Question 1. That's writing inequalities. So suppose yesterday I graded 22 projects in Algebra 1A. When you subtract this from the total number of projects I graded for all my courses, there were still at least 48. Write an inequality to represent this situation. All right, so the very first thing I need to do is find out what I need to represent with a variable. So I'm reading through the problem and asking myself, what is the unknown? All right, so right here, it tells me that how many I graded yesterday. It tells me how many I graded at least for all my courses. What we don't know is the total number of projects that I graded. All right, so that's what I need a variable for. So I'm going to define x to be the total number of projects graded. Now we're going to go about writing an inequality and translating some of these keywords. So let's go ahead and say the total number of projects graded. Right? It says when you subtract this from the 22 I graded yesterday, then we still have at least 48. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start out by writing, here's the total number of projects I graded yesterday, or in total, sorry, excuse me. Yesterday I graded 22, so it says when you subtract that from the total. So if this is the total, I'm going to go ahead and subtract the 22 that I graded yesterday. And then it says that there were still at least 48. All right, and this word at least means greater than or equal to. So if I say I have at least 48, I mean 48 or more. So that, don't let the word least trick you into thinking that there should be a less than or less than symbol there. Think about what it means in English. At least 48 means 48 or more. So greater than or equal to 48. All right, so question 2 simply asks you to take the inequality that you wrote from question 1 and now solve it. All right, so this is the easy part. It's just like solving an equation, except for now we have a greater than or equal to sign. And you have to remember that when we multiply or divide an inequality by a negative, right, then we have to flip the direction of the inequality symbol. All right, so let's go ahead and solve this one-step inequality. In this case, to isolate the x, to get the x by itself on the left-hand side of the inequality, I have to do the opposite of subtracting 22, which is to add 22 to both sides. All right, so then I get that x is greater than or equal to. Notice I didn't have to flip the direction of the inequality symbol because I simply added. You can add or subtract anything you want, and you don't change it. So here I'm going to go ahead and do this operation. All right, and I get that x is greater than or equal to 70 in this case. All right, so solve the inequality that you wrote from question number 1 in the project, which is different from this one. All right, so question 3 states that I graded a total of 98 items this week. This includes both projects and discussions. The number of projects graded was less than 26. Let x represent the number of discussions graded. So remember, x is representing discussions. Write an inequality to represent this situation. So in this case, we had a total. We know there's a total of 98 items in total that were graded. Projects were less than 26. All right, so we're going to go ahead and try to write an inequality that represents that. So the way that I think about it is if I had a total of 98 total items graded, right? Here's my 98 total items. If I subtract away the number of discussions graded, so suppose I have the 98 and I take away the number of discussions, then that would mean that the number of projects graded here is going to be less than 26. Because we're writing an inequality that's representing the number of projects graded in terms of number of discussions. So here's the 98 total items, and then I just take away the number of discussions, and that means that the number of items that I graded for projects was less than 26. right? Because discussions and projects together total 98. Okay, so take the total, subtract away, in this case, discussions, and that has to be less than the number of projects, which is 26. All right, so question 4 now is the easy part. It's saying, let's solve the inequality from the previous problem. So we're just using inverse operations to isolate x. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and isolate x on the left-hand side of this inequality. My first step is to go ahead and, if this is a positive 98 on the left, I want to do the opposite. So I want to subtract 98 from both sides. All right, then I get that negative x, remember we keep the sign with it here, is less than, just because I'm subtracting, I don't flip that inequality yet, right? Because I can add or subtract anything. All right, so the rules here say that when I have two opposite signs, I should subtract the numbers and keep the sign of the larger number. All right, so I get 72, and then I know that it's going to be negative 72 because the 98 is larger. All right, so the last step, I don't want to know what negative x is, I want to know what positive x is. So you can think of there as being a negative 1 in front of that x. So now my step to isolate the x is going to be to divide both sides of this inequality by negative 1. And since my action was to divide both sides by a negative, that's when we flip the direction of the inequality symbol. So now it's greater than 72. All right, so let's think if this makes sense in the context of the problem. Right, because in the last question, it stated that the number of projects graded was less than 26. Well, if the number of projects graded was less than 26, then this is saying that the number of discussion posts graded had to be greater than 72. Right, and that makes sense. 72 and 26 gives us the total of 98. All right, so finally last, question 5. Last year we had a total of 520 graduates. This year we had more than twice as many graduates. Tammy thinks the situation can be represented by the inequality x is less than 2 times 520, and John thinks the situation should be represented by the inequality 1/2 x is greater than 520. Who is incorrect? Okay, so we'll figure out, try to think which one's correct and which one's incorrect, and then we'll state it. All right, so if we had 520 graduates last year, and then here it is, the key information, twice as many this year, more than twice as many. So we have more than twice. All right, so more than implies greater than, right? And twice implies multiplying by 2. All right, so everyone kind of looks at this one right away and thinks this one must be right because we're going to take the 520 graduates we had and multiply it by 2. That'd be twice as many. However, this inequality symbol says less than. So as what this would be saying to me is that this year we have less than twice as many graduates as last year. But that's not what the problem reads here. It says we had more than twice as many graduates. So I would agree with this inequality if this was flipped. If it said greater than, then this would be correct. All right, so we now know who is incorrect. And in this case, it is in fact Tammy that is incorrect. Tammy is incorrect. And Tammy's incorrect because she has the wrong inequality symbol in her inequality. It should be greater than, not less than. Well, let's see if John's right. Okay, so think about solving John's inequality here. So most people look at this and think the 1/2. And they're going, wait, we're not cutting the graduates in half, we're timesing them by 2, so this one must be wrong. All right, but that would be incorrect because solve this inequality for x. Get the x by itself. So in this case, in order to undo multiplying by 1/2, I can multiply the reciprocal, which is 2 over 1, or 2. So it means I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by 2. All right, so then on the left-hand side, we'd be just left with x. And on the right-hand side, we'd have 2 being multiplied by 520. Oh, now look how this is almost the same as Tammy's, except for now it has the correct inequality symbol. All right, so actually it turns out that John is correct and Tammy is incorrect. So thank you for watching this project video. I hope it helps. Go back and answer the questions.